Everyone is focused on Diddy right now. The arrests, the allegations, the fallout. But there's one name that keeps showing up in the background of this story, and almost nobody is willing to say it out loud. Ellen DeGeneres. And here's the unsettling part. The evidence people are pointing to isn't rumors. It isn't leaks. It's old footage, public footage, clips that aired on national television and were laughed off for years. So the real question is whether the internet is overreacting. The real question is, why does this name keep being quietly avoided while everything else is being exposed? Because silence at this point isn't empty. It's loud. Joe Rogan recently said something that sent shockwaves across the internet, and almost immediately a familiar cycle began to repeat itself. Outrage, speculation, viral debates, and an overwhelming collective hunger for answers. Whenever a major celebrity scandal breaks, especially one involving power, fame, and alleged criminal behavior, the public reaction follows a predictable pattern. First comes the shock, then the disbelief, followed closely by anger and suspicion. People start asking not just what happened, but how it could have happened for so long without anyone stopping it. And while headlines have been completely dominated by the escalating legal drama surrounding Diddy, a growing number of observers have started asking a much more uncomfortable question. Why does one particular name keep hovering just outside the spotlight? Even as social media timelines are flooded with reaction videos, stitched clips, and endless theories, there is a noticeable and almost unsettling quiet when it comes to Ellen DeGeneres. Her name continues to resurface in old interviews, resurfaced videos, and forgotten moments from the past, yet it rarely becomes the main focus of mainstream discussion. That silence has begun to feel meaningful to many people, because in moments like this, absence isn't neutral, it becomes part of the story. When everyone is talking and one person isn't being talked about, people start wondering why. As the allegations against Diddy grew more serious and public attention intensified, the internet did what it always does when trust in powerful figures begins to collapse. It went backward. Social media users, content creators, and self-proclaimed online investigators started combing through years of archived footage. Old talk show appearances, forgotten interviews, casual jokes, and throwaway comments were dragged back into the spotlight and reframed with ominous captions and dramatic edits. Moments that once felt harmless, playful, or even forgettable were suddenly being examined with suspicion. People weren't just searching for hard evidence, they were searching for patterns. They wanted to know whether the signs were always there and whether the public simply ignored them. And the more they dug, the more they noticed how openly many celebrities had spoken about Diddy's parties over the years. These gatherings were often described as legendary, exclusive, and almost mythical within Hollywood culture. Attending them was treated like a flex, a marker of status, something to casually brag about in interviews. In hindsight, that openness now feels unsettling to many viewers, as if something that should have raised questions was instead normalized and celebrated. Among all of these resurfaced clips, the ones featuring Ellen DeGeneres stood out in a way that felt distinct from the rest. Not because she was accused of committing any crime, but because of how natural and unguarded the interactions appeared. On her show, Diddy wasn't treated like a distant guest or someone she was carefully promoting for a project. Instead, he was joked with, teased, and spoken to as someone she clearly had an existing rapport with. The tone of their exchanges felt familiar rather than formal, relaxed rather than cautious. They laughed openly about his party reputation on national television, with studio audiences cheering along and treating the conversation as light entertainment. At the time, it came across as classic talk show banter, easy, playful, and designed to get laughs. But now, in the shadow of serious allegations, those same moments are being replayed with a completely different emotional weight. What once sounded like harmless jokes now sounds like insider knowledge. What once felt casual now feels loaded with implication. The shift in how these clips are perceived, from comedy to concern, is exactly why Ellen's name keeps quietly resurfacing in online conversations, even when no one seems willing to confront it head-on. This growing unease is amplified by the fact that Ellen has largely remained silent as these clips circulate. In the world of public relations and legal strategy, silence can be a calculated and sensible move. But in the court of public opinion, silence is rarely interpreted as neutral. Instead, it becomes a blank space that people fill with their own assumptions. To critics, that silence feels evasive. To skeptics, it feels deliberate. And to an internet already primed to distrust powerful figures, it feels like confirmation that something is being avoided. The reality may be far more mundane: legal caution, personal boundaries, or a refusal to engage in speculation. But online discourse doesn't thrive on restraint. It thrives on interpretation. What makes this situation even more complex is the broader context of Ellen's public image over the past few years. Her reputation took a major hit following reports of a toxic workplace environment behind the scenes of her show. That scandal fundamentally changed how many people view her. Once someone's carefully crafted public persona cracks, everything connected to them is re-examined through a harsher lens. Past interactions that once seemed innocent are no longer given the benefit of the doubt. So when people now watch Ellen laughing comfortably with Diddy, they aren't just reacting to those moments alone. They're reacting to a larger sense of disillusionment. To some viewers, it reinforces the idea that what happens on camera and what happens behind closed doors can be very different things. In the end, what keeps this conversation alive isn't proof, but perception. There is a real legal case unfolding. There are real clips from the past that show casual conversations about a world that now feels darker than it once did. And there is a public that no longer feels satisfied with surface-level explanations. Whether Ellen's involvement was nothing more than standard talk show familiarity or something more significant remains unproven. But in an era where trust in celebrities and institutions is at an all-time low, even unanswered questions can feel explosive. And as long as those old clips keep circulating, the silence surrounding them will continue to speak, loudly, persistently, and uncomfortably. This is the moment where Joe Rogan's commentary truly shifted the tone of the entire conversation. He wasn't reacting out of shock or emotion alone. He was zooming out and questioning the culture that allowed everything to feel so normal for so long. On his podcast, Rogan made it clear that what bothered him most wasn't just the allegations themselves, but the way celebrity culture had treated Diddy's world as something glamorous and untouchable. For years, famous people openly talked about his parties as if receiving an invitation was a status symbol. Being there meant you were important. It meant you were in. Celebrities casually bragged about attending, laughed about how wild things got, and dropped vague hints that suggested everyone knew these gatherings were on another level. They spoke with knowing smiles, half-jokes, and carefully chosen words, enough to intrigue but never enough to raise alarms. And now, suddenly, those same voices sound distant and detached. The laughter is gone. The confidence is gone. People who once spoke freely now act shocked, confused, or completely removed, as if the entire party culture never existed at all. Rogan's frustration wasn't directed at one individual. It was aimed at what he sees as a collective case of selective memory and willful denial. Within that framework, Ellen's name becomes impossible to overlook. She wasn't someone who appeared briefly on the edges of the story or was mentioned once in passing. She invited Diddy onto her show multiple times and engaged with him openly, comfortably, and publicly. These weren't tense interviews or guarded conversations. They were playful, relaxed, and full of inside-style humor. She joked with him directly about his party reputation in front of millions of viewers, reinforcing the idea that this was all common knowledge, something everyone laughed about. One interview in particular continues to circulate online because of how revealing it feels in hindsight. In that moment, Diddy spoke about how his parties had different phases, explaining how things changed as the night went on and how the real energy didn't begin until after midnight. At the time, it sounded like classic celebrity exaggeration, mysterious but entertaining. Ellen's reaction, which may have been intended as lighthearted banter, is now being scrutinized far more closely. Instead of sounding surprised or curious, many viewers today interpret her response as recognition, as if she already understood exactly what he was talking about. Whether that interpretation is fair or not is still up for debate, but that's precisely the point. Once public trust begins to erode, every tone, every pause, and every smile gets re-examined. And moments like these, ambiguous, unspecific, but undeniably familiar, become the perfect fuel for speculation, replayed endlessly by an audience no longer willing to take anything at face value. What truly amplifies the suspicion for many people is Ellen's continued silence. She has not publicly addressed the resurfaced clips, nor has she offered any clarification about her past comments in light of the serious allegations now surrounding Diddy. From a legal, professional, or public relations standpoint, that silence is understandable. Speaking too soon or saying the wrong thing can quickly spiral into lawsuits, misinterpretations, or long-term reputational damage. For someone with decades in the public eye, staying quiet can be the safest option. But the internet doesn't operate on legal logic or professional caution. It operates on perception, emotion, and instinct. And to a large portion of the online audience, silence doesn't feel neutral. It feels like avoidance. It feels deliberate. It feels like someone choosing not to engage because engagement might invite questions they don't want to answer. In today's digital culture, refusing to respond is rarely seen as restraint. It's often interpreted as an admission of guilt, even when there's no factual basis for that conclusion. That suspicion becomes even stronger when viewed through the lens of Ellen's already fractured public image. The toxic workplace scandal surrounding her show didn't just damage her reputation. It reshaped how people interpret everything associated with her. Former employees described an environment marked by intimidation, fear, and an unspoken rule that speaking up could cost you your career. The contrast between those reports and the carefully cultivated, Be Kind brand was jarring, and for many fans, deeply disillusioning. Once that disconnect was exposed, the public stopped taking Ellen's on-camera persona at face value. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, and when it breaks, it changes how every past moment is remembered. Interactions that once felt harmless are suddenly viewed with skepticism. Jokes that once seemed light are now examined for hidden meaning. So when people rewatch Ellen laughing with Diddy today, they no longer see a comedian engaging in playful talk show banter. They see someone who, in their minds, has already demonstrated an ability to present warmth and kindness on camera, while something far less comfortable existed behind the scenes. Whether that perception is fair or not, it's the reality of how public opinion works once doubt takes hold. Adding even more fuel to the fire was Ellen's decision to step away from the United States and relocate to the United Kingdom, a move that, on its own, would normally raise little to no concern. Celebrities leave the US all the time for reasons that have nothing to do with controversy. Some want privacy. Some want distance from Hollywood culture. Others are simply looking for a quieter life, political alignment, or personal peace after decades under non-stop scrutiny. In a vacuum, Ellen's relocation could easily fall into any of those categories. But the internet doesn't judge actions in isolation. It judges them in context. And in this case, the timing mattered enormously. Her move happened while Diddy's legal troubles were escalating rapidly, and while more celebrity names were being whispered, speculated about, and dissected across social media platforms. For many people watching from the outside, that overlap felt unsettling. To some, it looked like a strategic retreat, stepping away from the spotlight before the pressure intensified. To others, it felt far more dramatic, almost like an escape from a narrative that was beginning to turn dangerous. Whether those interpretations are fair or grounded in reality is still unknown, but once they entered the public conversation, they became nearly impossible to separate from the facts. In online culture, timing often becomes evidence, even when it shouldn't. And once a narrative gains momentum, it takes on a life of its own, spreading faster than corrections or clarifications ever could. The situation grew even more chaotic when rumors began circulating online that attempted to link Ellen to completely unrelated legal claims involving her former DJ, Stephen "T-Witch" Boss. These rumors moved quickly, spreading across platforms through vague posts, emotionally charged speculation, and misleading summaries that blurred fact and fiction. The claims suggested hidden recordings, legal consequences, and secret connections that, if true, would have been explosive. But they weren't true. Fact-checkers later confirmed that these allegations were false, with no evidence supporting them and no verified legal connection tying Ellen, Twitch, and Diddy together in that way. Still, by the time those corrections surfaced, the rumors had already done their work. They had circulated widely, lodged themselves into public consciousness, and deepened the sense of mistrust surrounding Ellen's name. What mattered wasn't just that the rumors were false. It was that so many people were willing to believe them in the first place. That willingness revealed something critical about the current cultural climate. Public trust in celebrities, institutions, and media figures has eroded so deeply speculation now fills the void almost automatically. When people feel they've been misled before, they stop waiting for proof. Even debunked stories leave behind a residue, reinforcing the belief that there must be something hidden, something not yet exposed, even when no evidence exists. This broader atmosphere of suspicion is exactly why Joe Rogan's role in this conversation carries so much weight. Rogan isn't positioning himself as a judge, nor is he presenting legal evidence or making direct accusations. Instead, he's acting as a conduit for public frustration, a mirror reflecting what a large segment of the audience is already feeling, but doesn't see articulated in mainstream media. His point isn't that Ellen committed crimes or that she should be legally implicated. His argument is cultural rather than judicial. He's pointing to what he sees as a long-standing pattern in Hollywood, where accountability is unevenly distributed. Some figures are interrogated relentlessly, their every word and past interaction examined under a microscope, while others remain largely insulated by wealth, influence, industry loyalty, and strategic silence. Because Rogan operates outside traditional media structures and isn't bound by corporate oversight or Hollywood relationships, his willingness to ask uncomfortable questions resonates strongly with his audience. He voices doubts that many people already have but feel aren't being acknowledged elsewhere. That doesn't make those doubts factual, fair, or legally meaningful, but it does make them louder, more persistent, and harder to dismiss. And in the modern media landscape, volume alone can shape perception, even in the absence of proof. Ultimately, this story exists in a wide and uncomfortable gray area where verified facts and public interpretation bleed into one another. On one side, there is a real, unfolding legal case involving Diddy, an investigation rooted in court filings, testimony, and the slow, methodical process of the justice system. That side of the story operates on evidence, legal standards, and outcomes that take time. On the other side, there is also real footage, unchanged, unaltered, and undeniably public, of Ellen joking with Diddy about his party culture on national television. Those clips exist independently of the case, frozen in time, yet endlessly replayed in the present. What connects these two worlds is not proof of criminal behavior or direct involvement, but perception. It's the emotional bridge people build when they look back and feel that something now seems off. It's the uneasy sensation that moments once dismissed as entertainment feel different when viewed through the lens of what we know today. For some people, Ellen's silence, combined with her past controversies and her visibly comfortable on-camera familiarity with Diddy, raises questions they believe are fair to ask. To them, this isn't about accusing her of crimes. It's about accountability, proximity, and awareness. They argue that when someone is close enough to joke openly about a powerful figure's world, and that world later becomes the subject of serious allegations, it's reasonable to wonder what was known, what was normalized, and what was ignored. They see her lack of response as part of a larger pattern, powerful people stepping back, saying nothing, and allowing time to dilute public outrage. For others, however, this entire situation represents a classic case of hindsight bias. From that perspective, people are projecting present-day knowledge onto past interactions, turning moments of harmless banter into something they were never intended to be. Jokes are being treated like confessions. Familiarity is being mistaken for complicity, and normal talk show dynamics are being reframed as evidence of insider awareness. In that view, Ellen is being judged not for what she did, but for how those moments feel now, after the cultural mood has shifted. As of now, it's important to state clearly that there is no public evidence proving that Ellen participated in, enabled, or knowingly supported any illegal behavior connected to Diddy. No charges, no testimony, no documented involvement. But the reality of modern discourse is that proof is no longer the sole driver of belief. In today's digital environment, narratives often form long before facts are fully established, and once they take hold, they are incredibly difficult to dismantle. Public opinion doesn't wait for court outcomes or verified reports. It moves on instinct, emotion, and distrust. And in an era where faith in celebrities, institutions, and media figures has been deeply shaken, even the absence of evidence doesn't always feel reassuring. As things stand now, Ellen appears to be choosing distance and privacy over confrontation. Rather than stepping into the storm of speculation, she has stepped away from the spotlight, seemingly deciding that silence and separation are safer than engagement. From her perspective, this may be the only way to avoid inflaming a conversation that thrives on interpretation rather than facts. But the internet is not built to respect silence. It is built to fill it. Clips will continue to resurface, stripped further and further from their original context. Comments will continue to multiply, evolving with each repost, each reaction video, and each new voice adding another layer of meaning. Speculation will harden into belief for some, while others will push back, arguing that this is exactly how misinformation and unfair narratives are born. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan and countless online commentators will continue pushing the conversation forward, not necessarily because they believe they have all the answers, but because they believe the questions themselves matter. They see this moment as part of a larger cultural reckoning. one where polished images are no longer accepted at face value, and where silence from powerful figures is treated as something to be interrogated, not excused. The woman who once built her entire public identity around kindness, warmth, and approachability now finds that identity being scrutinized from every possible angle. Her legacy is no longer defined solely by what she presented to the world, but by how the world now interprets it. Whether this reassessment is fair, exaggerated, or driven by collective distrust remains an open debate. But one thing is undeniable: the audience has changed. People are no longer content with carefully managed narratives or comforting slogans. They want transparency, they want accountability, and they want answers even when the truth is complicated, uncomfortable, or unresolved. In this new landscape, looking away is no longer an option, and silence, whether intentional or not, will always be heard as a response. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think these old clips are being unfairly reinterpreted with hindsight? Or do you believe Ellen knew more than she ever admitted? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments, because this conversation isn't going away. And if you want more deep dives into celebrity stories the mainstream won't break down like this, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and click the next video on your screen. Because the deeper you look, the harder it gets to look away.